A massive horde of drugs laid right out in the open? A battle between impatience and a train where impatience won, and just lots and lots of narcotics. All that and more coming up in this video. P.S. Don't do drugs, kids. What was the fastest way you've seen someone ruin their life? Story 1. Guy from my school went to rob a corner store at knife point. He pulled up with his push bike, went into the store, and threatened the shopkeeper with a knife to give him all the money in the register. The shopkeeper refused, and the robber was too much of a coward to do anything, so he grabbed a pack of gum and ran out. 20 minutes later, the robber realized he left his bike behind in his panic, so he went to go get it. This was at the same time the police were questioning the shopkeeper on the incident. They swiftly arrested him then and there. Think he got 2 years for stealing gum at knife point. We now have a Discord. Check out the server in the link in the description. Story 2. Kid I went to high school with used to break into homes in his neighborhood to steal phones with his younger brother. They always did seem to have a couple of screws loose, but never thought they were capable of hurting anyone. Then, one night, they robbed the wrong house. As they were sneaking into the kitchen, the owner of the house came in for a late-night glass of water and caught them in the act. Unluckily for them, he was also a former Marine. They got into it, but one of the kids had a knife and repeatedly started stabbing the dude in the head. They ran off after that, but the next day they were arrested. One is still in juvie 5 years later. The other was sentenced to 30 years in state prison. Story 3. Couple of guys in my hometown were looking for something to steal so they could sell it to buy drugs. They came to a house where no one was supposed to be home, and one guy gets out of the car and goes to the house to steal a grill. A friend of the homeowner happened to be there and came out when he stepped onto the porch. He tells the friend that he is looking for his dog, so the guy walks out into the yard to help look for it. The would-be robber panics and pulls out a gun and shoots the man in the back of the head. At 21, he started a life sentence for a really stupid murder. Story 4. My half-brother decides it was a good idea to try and rob the restaurant he worked at. Didn't wear a mask or try to hide his voice in any way. At the time, he was hopelessly addicted to crack, so he obviously wasn't thinking straight. He convinced his dealer's girlfriend to help him out. He secured a gun from him, and he was dumb enough or desperate enough to not check it, and didn't realize it was a BB gun. They did manage to get out of the restaurant with $7,000, but the dealer and his very large friends were waiting for them when they came out. They beat the crap out of him, took the money, and left him unconscious for the police. He got 7 years in prison for armed robbery and grand larceny. He did manage to kick his drug habit in prison, though. Story 5. A few years back, one of the students attending the university I work at got caught trying to sneak a crapload of drugs into a local nightclub. The first we found out about it was when some police officers turned up with a warrant to go through his room, and I was the lucky person chosen to go let them in. So I opened the door and, oh dear lord, there's drugs everywhere. If you've ever seen one of those old-timey pick and mix shops with all the sweets in big glass jars, imagine that, but with pills and wraps of powder instead. Everything else was all super neat and tidy, and it was one of the cleanest student rooms I'd ever been in. Just that every flat surface had a container full of drugs or some other paraphernalia on it. This student was in his 4th year of a master's degree and due to finish in 3 months. He ended up being charged with possession with intent to supply, and since a lot of the stuff in there was Class A, he was now going to be in prison for a decade or 2. He was also expelled, of course, and will still be on the hook for the 60,000 pounds of student debt afterwards. Story 6. One of my friends ordered crack from the dark web. Where I'm from, it's not something anybody ever really does. It's unheard of, really. Anyway, fast forward 6 months, and he's the most vile person you could ever meet. He dragged another friend down with him. He went from engineer to stealing and backstabbing in about a month. It's heartbreaking. Don't do crack. Story 7. Friend got married right after high school, left for boot camp and deployed soon after, gave his wife power of attorney. She destroyed his credit and put him in $200,000 of debt in 8 months. They divorced, but his CO advised him to just give her whatever she wants to keep her quiet. So now he's also paying alimony. It sucks because he only joined the military to pay for college, but now he's afraid he won't be able to afford it even with a GI Bill. Story 8. Huffing paint. My college buddy was an affable stoner who liked psychedelics, weed, and drinking. He was broke, so he got into huffing paint over the summer. He passed out with a plastic bag full of spray paint over his face and ended up depriving his brain of oxygen and is now mentally disabled due to brain damage. Like, we're talking drooling, slurring, and can't tie his own shoes or perform basic life tasks level. Story 9. My sister and her husband started doing crack. Both lost their job, and they lost their house. They moved across the country with their kids who hated them for being big screw-ups. Sister decided to get sober after getting a DUI. Husband kicks her out for it. She moves back with nothing but the clothes on her back and gets sober. Kids move out to be with her a year later. She gets her life in order and is now in the process of buying a house. Husband works now just to support a drug and alcohol habit while living in his mom's house. So even though she ruined her life pretty bad for a while, she managed to get her stuff back together. Story 10. In less than 5 years, one of my cousins was married twice to 2 equally horrible people and blew through 2 inheritances. He and his first wife trashed a house my grandmother let them live in for free and got mad when she asked him to pay for repairs. He is now completely alienated from family, including his parents, and disowned. Story 11. I once knew someone who swapped university courses midway through so that he could become a teacher in a subject he was more passionate about. We were really pleased for him. He was excited, and it all got off to a great start. He eventually completed his degree and qualified as a teacher in that subject. However, he is no longer a teacher. Why is that? Well, turns out he slept with 2 underage students and verbally harassed them afterwards. There was a failed third attempt as well. He then fled to Italy for some reason, he has no connection there as far as I know, to escape justice. Eventually turned himself in and was arrested when he arrived back in the UK. Just shy of 3 years in prison, although he was paroled at around the halfway mark, 10 years on the UK Sex Offender Registry, with a supplementary sexual harm prevention order, which controls his interaction with young people, banned from teaching for life. Apparently, that wasn't all. I heard other gossip about his behavior in the classroom, which was deeply troubling, but not so criminal, so nothing was done. I have no idea what he does now. People have seen him, spoken to him, but he doesn't speak of what happened. No idea what he was thinking or what he initially set out to achieve. Did he go into teaching so he could do those things? Or did his mind somehow warp a bit later on? Story 12. A friend of mine was 3 years from retirement at age 53 and decided to throw it away. He used to take the winter off and spend it with his family. He used to do hard drugs, and he decided to start doing some pretty hard stuff winter before last. He taught his 18-year-old son how to do drugs and run around with women. He didn't return to work and lied to his wife about them not being able to take him back. He texted me in the middle of the night that he would have hung himself by the time I woke up. He sent the same message to his brother, who called the police to do a welfare check, and they found drugs. He is losing his beautiful house and is going to be living out of a camp trailer for now. He had everything going so well, and now he has to start over. Story 13. A friend in high school. He was really popular, good looking, dude could have been a model, and really smart. Got accepted to an Ivy League school, and all he had to do was make sure he passed all his classes and he was in. Well, the last week of senior year, he has a math exam, and all he had to do was just show up and write his name. The teacher had it set up where you could get at least 40% by just writing your name. He couldn't get a 0 or else he wouldn't pass. This moron decides to skip his exam and go get high instead. Failed the exam and the class and couldn't attend the Ivy League school. He eventually spiraled over the years into drugs and dead-end jobs. It's been 15 years since high school, and last I heard, he's still living at home. He could have went places in life, but decided to get stoned instead. Story 14. An Indian guy I worked with at a tech company was there late one night. He asked the Latina cleaning lady that was there for the night cleaning if she'd like to go to a hotel with him, and then whipped his dong out. This was done directly under cameras in the upstairs area of the office. She called the police, and he was shipped back to India, losing a 6-figure job. Story 15. This is a long and complicated story, but here's a short summary. This all happened in the span of about 6 months. A friend of a friend started dating a new lady immediately after his divorce. She was clearly more interested in his money than anything else and was generally mean and an instigator of problems. But he just didn't see that, regardless of how many times people warned him. They'd been dating for a bit, and because she had young children, they were older. Her late 30s, him late 50s, and his lease was up soon. She convinced him that they needed to buy a house together. She got him to give her his portion of the down payment on the house in cash. He handed over $80,000, which was actually most of the total cost. Then, she didn't put her name on anything because his credit wasn't as good as hers. She convinced him to buy all of the furniture, painting, flooring, and other stuff. Her excuse for that was claiming that she was going to pay for some remodeling and a new roof, which the house didn't need, but she lied about. She also convinced him to give her the money for all those things in cash. When the house was nice and ready, he lived there for about 2 days before she dumped him. She said all this face to face. There's nothing in writing between them. There is no paper trail. There's no text messages, there's no witnesses. It looks like she just paid for the house, which is in her name, and that's the end of it. He has no recourse. He lost all of his savings, got depression, and had a suicide attempt, which led to a lost job. He had to move back in with his ex-wife. Story 16. A guy I know decided one day he was going to rob someone. Now, this guy has never owned a gun or anything and never really was into robbing people or anything. He just sold weed. So he decides to get a gun and go rob someone. He didn't test the waters, nothing, just jumped right in. A few hours later, he's arrested and his bail is set at $70,000. He's awaiting trial currently, but his ass is not getting out. Charges are robbery, first degree, possession of stolen property under $1,000, possession of an illegal firearm, and possession of marijuana with intent to sell. Way to go, dude. You messed up bad. Didn't even last a day on the run. Story 17. Some moron I knew from school still lived at home with his parents and kept dealing drugs from the house. Their house was directly in between a park and a Catholic school and a few houses away from the police station. An undercover cop actually gave him a warning saying they know everything he's doing and he better stop. Spoiler alert, he did not stop. So a month later, they arrested him. He got a 20-year sentence because he was X amount of feet from a school and a park. It was a first-time offense for him. He got 3 times the sentence they decided to give big ghetto drug dealers because of the location of his parents' house. Story 18. My elementary school teacher and later my middle school principal, nicest guy ever, was caught pretending to be a student on Snapchat and asking hundreds of girls for nudes. The police believe that he'd been doing it for years. He was a family friend and loved by many, had a wife and several kids. Now, he's in jail for 25 years. It kind of makes me sick thinking back to it. Edit, I did some more research, and he also tried to hook up with a middle school girl, and after refusal, he convinced her to try to kill herself. She is now in a mental hospital after multiple suicide attempts. Story 19. Former high school teacher. He was a retired English teacher, former coach, former senior class advisor, confidant for students at risk. Wife was also a teacher, and both their kids went to our school and graduated. Turns out he was being investigated for underage explicit content. I think possession and distribution. Not sure about solicitation. He was in school talking to my freshman class in his wife's room about preparing for the future the last day of classes. 2 weeks later, we read on the news and papers that state police, sheriffs, and city police raided his house, and he killed himself in the woods out behind his house. He had laptops full of videos and pictures. It shook our town, to say the least. Luckily, the wife was retiring at the end of the year anyway, so she didn't have to live with the shame at the school. I felt so bad for her, though. She and the kids were investigated and knew nothing about it. People hide their demons well, I guess. Story 20. I didn't see it, but my best friend growing up saw a mutual, somewhat friend try and beat a train in their car at a railroad crossing. No bueno. The winner was easy to predict. Life definitely was ruined in less than 30 seconds, including bad decision time, and left my best friend traumatized for quite a bit. He was on the other side of the tracks and recognized them, then saw their car hit. We walked the tracks several times to help him deal with it, I guess. Moral of the story? Just wait 5 to 20 minutes for the train to pass. Follow-up train story. A year or so later on my birthday, 2 carloads of friends and I were picking up some beer from a guy happy to buy it for minors, which we were. We were headed to the drive-in for a fun night. I was a passenger in the lead truck. The driver, a moron, thought it would be funny to beat the train at an ungated railroad crossing. There's a lot of them in the Midwest. His reasoning being later explained as, well, we'd have to beat our friends to the drive-in by 10 minutes. He went so far off the road beating it, he put a 2-inch dent in the front rim of his truck from hitting the train track. I damn near strangled him for taking my life into his stupid hands. Left him to change his flat alone and clambered into our friend's car, beers in hand, seething. Absolute idiot. Don't mess with trains. Story 21. Working on Manus AB in Kyrgyzstan. A contractor showed up to the network shop on his first day, got fired. He showed up and asked where the snack room was. Got very upset when he was told there wasn't a snack room. Well, Google has a snack room. Dude, you're on a military base in the middle of nowhere. Walk literally next door to the chow hall and grab a candy bar if you need one. About an hour later, he asked where the nap room was. Again, he got very upset when he was told there isn't one. So upset that he started throwing stuff around and we had to call security forces. He was forcibly removed from the base and banned by the commander his first day. I can't even imagine how hard that destroyed his IT career since the company had to fly him home the day they flew him in. No one was going to hire the guy after that. Story 22. Two of my childhood friends, who are sisters, got pregnant intentionally. One was 16, the other was 14. Both ruined their lives. The oldest was offered many modeling career contracts, but her husband threatened to leave her if she accepted. The other one was just crazy, and as I hear now, has 2 kids with a third on the way. I haven't spoken to either since meeting their firstborns. Was a harsh wake-up call when I saw how broken their mother was, as she broke herself daily to make sure her kids could go to school and aimed to be better than she was. Part of that also heightened my fear of relationships and sex in general. I can't stand feeling trapped, and am in no way comfortable with the idea of intimacy. A large part of me appreciates those fears I have, even if I am a bit lonely. Story 23. This dude got hired to work with us. He had all sorts of scabs and just had that look to him. Everyone knew he had a problem with drugs. His excuse was he was a prospector and has scabs all over him from rocks hitting him. Anyway, he opened up to me one day at lunch about how he's trying to get everything back on track. His wife is hooked on a different drug. Most of his money went toward that because she was hopelessly hooked. For about 4 months, he was doing great. His skin cleared up, he got some color on his face, and he was sort of just a different person. One day, we go to lunch at Waffle House, and while we're eating, this thuggish-looking dude approaches us and offers us some drugs. Sorry for having to drop the classiest sentence of all time on you like that. I'm like, hell no, but my coworker is like, let me get your number. Next day, no call and no show. Never heard from him again. A month or so later, a coworker comes in. He saw the dude begging on a street corner and took a picture. Story 24. Guy at one of my early corporate jobs was a really good employee and was up for promotion that would have like a huge pay raise. Like $20,000 up in salary. Started coming into late work though. Turns out he was secretly addicted to alcohol, pills, and coke and had a bad relapse. Did not get the promotion and performance slipped. He got fired and heard through the grapevine he went on a bender for a few months before getting evicted from his apartment. Haven't heard about him in over 10 years, but in the span of a few weeks his addiction cost him everything. Don't do hard drugs. Story 25. Watched someone join the military, and within a year got married to his girlfriend of 4 months, then within 2 years had a daughter and twin sons. He hates his wife, but they have kids together. He's home now, but he's miserable, and she's miserable, and the babies are happy, but only because the daughter is 2 and the twins are 1. Give it a few years, and I'm sure the kids will be miserable too. The worst part is that his parents were together for far too long, and he knows the toll it can take on the kids, but he just wants to be like his dad, I guess. Even though the dad says his biggest mistake was waiting so long to divorce the mother. Story 26. Kid who graduated high school the year after me robbed the local McDonald's at gunpoint with some other guy. We live in a smallish town, about 9,000 people, so it didn't take long at all for them to be caught. He was only 17. He was in prison for around 4 years. While I did my undergrad, he was in prison, so I think about that long. He was doing a program where he got time off his sentence for working in a factory-type setting. Some kind of deal about hours worked turning into time served. He was very close to getting out when he went out to a car with a female CO and got caught sleeping with her. His sentence got extended by quite a bit, and now she's in prison too. Story 27. Heard a story from a colleague I worked with. He went to a party with some of his friends where they drank heavily and later got bored, so they decided to go for a walk. While walking, they saw road construction. Completely empty because it was nighttime, and there were some machines that were used to lay the road. They checked the doors of each of them and found one loader which was unlocked and had keys inside. They decided to go for a ride with it and drove 20 kilometers to the nearest town where they went to the beach and ended up drowning it. The next morning, police found and arrested all of them. They all went on to serve some time in prison. Story 28. A schoolmate had just become a dad, and he was pasting pics all over MySpace. He posted that he was heading out of town with the family to show his new baby off to his mom. Next we knew, they had a crash. It was a highway speed head-on. My mate was in the front passenger seat, holding the baby. The baby was found a long way down the road after smashing through the windscreen. The dad was badly injured. The baby died. Depression, alcoholism, and all sorts of bad stuff has followed this mistake. He will likely never recover. Story 29. This was like 20 years ago, and I forget where it happened, but I read about a substitute teacher who went into the classroom one morning and just started fondling kids right out in the open, like third graders. Of course, he was arrested immediately and locked up for eons. I just had to wonder, what makes someone get up in the morning and while they're getting dressed, look in the mirror and decide, yep, this is it. Today's the day I will irrevocably screw it all up. Just gonna punch out of society here real quick.